A lot of the conspiracy theories that have come after it, that it kind of set the stage, the mechanisms behind the JFK assassination. You see time and again with the Lone Nut Killer and these other huge events that seem to bring about a strategy of tension, as May Brussel called it, or the revelation of the method. And so anyway, during that period, I delved deeply into the Kennedy assassination, read dozens and dozens of books. So that got me into looking into conspiracy theories as well.
Well, it's essentially what you're describing with the UFO and the occult, the astral projection and all that. Seems like very much a common experience, I think, is when it's like energy follows thought, and wherever we direct our attention, then we stir up, we attract the very things that we're actually looking for, just as Robert Anton Wilson talks about. If you start thinking about the number 23, then you'll spot it everywhere, and it's not enough just to say that you're noticing something that you didn't notice before. It's as if consciousnness is actually generating phenomena that will match what we're putting out, and that's kind of what you described, isn't it, with the UFO experience, that you had unwittingly performed this ritual by voicing your intent, your will, which was to see a UFO, and then actually summon these energies to give you this demonstration. And then with astral projection, I think that's something that is quite common if we just kind of decide. It has been a very innocent way, I think, that just a sort of innocent curiosity. If we actually try to will these things to happen, then it tends not to work. But when we're in that very sort of pure innocent state, where we're just open to it, then it's like we create this window of opportunity, and that's the window onto the imaginal realm, and then this energy comes through in the form that we've actually decided to give it. So, but then you're getting into conspiracy and parapolitical, and so this is an area that I'm exploring now, the way that these three different areas of research overlap. And on the one hand, you've got the occult. Everybody accepts, anyone who's got an experience of it, is a very subjective saying that you're dealing with archetypal energies which don't have any concrete form. They're forces that we give form by invoking and evoking and all the rest of it. So that's pretty much accepted now. And then you've got the UFOs, and the sort of divided camps there. There's the literal nuts and bolts ET hypothesizers, and then there's the more Keel Valley, Strieber camp, who go deeper down the rabbit hole, and they'll say, well, okay, that there is some sort of nuts and bolt phenomenon, like even Jung had to acknowledge that these things show up on radars, but they seem to be sourced in some other realm which isn't exclusively nuts and bolt, and so it's not either or, it's both and. And then you've got the people who just won't accept the nuts and bolts thing at all, and it's just purely a psychic phenomenon. And so there's definitely the UFO. It's like the two points of view seem to coexist quite comfortably. But then with the parapolitical, there's very few people, can't think of any really, who are talking about parapolitical phenomena as also being sourced in this imaginal realm also, in the sense that, satanic ritual abuse is probably one of the best areas, I think, because this is very much like the UFO, isn't it? When you look into this, there seems to be all this evidence, and yet there's very rarely is there any actual physical nuts and bolts evidence. And so there's this very mysterious kind of sense of this. Is this an entirely subjective thing, or does it become objective? At what point does it become objective?
Yeah, one parapolitical researcher, in fact, he's kind of popularized the phrase parapolitical, as Ken Thomas. And I don't know if you're familiar with his book, Maury Island UFO.
No, but I heard him talking about it on your show, actually, just recently.
Yeah, and so that whole site, and that was actually, they talk about Kenneth Arnold's sighting being the one that really launched the whole, modern era of UFOs in '47. But actually, Maury Island happened a little bit before Kenneth Arnold's sighting. Of course, Kenneth Arnold's sightings got more media play at the time, and actually, Kenneth Arnold later went and investigated Maury Island, and in recent years, other researchers have looked at some of the names involved, and one guy is this Fred Krisman, who a lot of people believe was one of the three tramps that were possibly behind the Kennedy assassination who got picked up at the grassy knoll. So, you start looking into some of these areas, parapolitical, ufological, the occult, and they certainly do seem to overlap. I was going to mention, you talked about Robert Anton Wilson and how when we tap into these energies or start working on a certain project and you tap into something, and synchronicity often comes into play, and that indeed was the case with my book I wrote on Kerry Thornley. There was quite a few synchronistic events with people like Wilson and Louise Lacey and a guy named Bob Newport. So these things happen when you put the energy out there,
Yeah, I was going to bring up Thornley and Robert Anton Wilson, with these areas that aren't clearly defined. They're not part of the consensus. We've just got various clues that we can, and threads that we can follow, and from those threads and clues we can patch together a picture. But because it's not in the realm of consensus, there's a lot of room for interpretations. It's like we're trying to join the dots without knowing if we've even got all the dots. So in my experience, and I imagine in yours, there's a lot of imagination is required. We need to make sort of imaginative leaps and forge connections that may or may not exist. Before we forge them, we may actually be weaving a narrative as much as uncovering it, which is kind of like Gonzo journalism, isn't it? The Hunter S. Thompson thing, where you put yourself into the investigation, just allow it to be a fully subjective thing and an autobiographical thing. And so I think to some extent, whether we like it or not, when we write about stuff, there's always going to be an autobiographical element. So I'm just curious, how aware you've been in the process of writing the book. You've written the Thornley book, which is actually about this. It's about a bunch of pranksters actually creating a sort of meme using elements of real history and the whole trickster element. And then you wrote the Manson book, which again, there's an awful lot of room for speculation there, because the official story doesn't add up, but we don't actually have the full picture, all the evidence we need to uncover the real story. So we have to be creative. So are you aware of that task in the process of researching these things, of very much being a Gonzo creative writer as well as a researcher?
Oh, certainly, and that creativity, I guess, a lot of times is just connecting those dots. With the Thornley book, I don't know how creative I had to be really because I didn't have to make a lot of the leaps in the book. Thornley did that for me. It was a matter of documenting, a lot of his quote-unquote conspiracy theories or his paranoid awareness. With the Manson book, that was the original motivation for writing that. Was over the years I had heard all these theories from the likes of Mae Brussel and John Judge, different conspiracy researchers, David Emery as well, and a few others, that the whole Manson family Tate LaBianca murders were part of some type of MK Ultra or military mind control thing. And so, that was my original motivation for writing those books, was to look at all those possible theories and to see if there was anything to them. And while I have no definitive smoking gun, there were sure a lot of curiosities that came up, a lot of coincidences, maybe not, during the course of writing that book. And somewhere along the line, to put things into context, I felt I had to really talk about Manson's childhood and paint the whole picture of the whole Manson family story. So it became in time, a 600-page book, which some have said is the most comprehensive on the Manson family. But yeah, it all stemmed from a lot of those conspiracy theories. And incidentally, I'm in the process of updating the book for publication here in 2009 for the 40th anniversary of the Tate LaBianca murders.
All right, so you're still working on it again.
Can't get away from it.
Right.
I don't necessarily like being known as just the Manson guy, But,
did you try to speak to Manson at any point?
I'm kind of afraid to. He's not too far from me, actually, as distance-wise. He's probably a couple hundred miles, and I communicate with people who talk to him, and maybe I'll pursue that, really, the way to do it.
Does he have visitors in jail?
I'm not sure if they're allowing visitors these days. That's a good question to answer for my book. I'll look into that. I know people who are in contact with him, they usually start the process by sending him a letter with their phone number, and Charlie will, if he wants, he'll call you back, and I don't necessarily want to give Charles Manson my home phone number.
I don't know. I'd kind of like to get him on Stormy Weather. I was just talking about that today, find out the real story, finally. Recent
rumors are saying that he has lung cancer.
Oh, shit.
So he might not be with us that much longer. Who knows? You hear a lot of these rumors, but there seems to be some substance to this one. A lot of the family members now that are, in jail for the Tate LaBianca murders, they come up for parole every few years, but it doesn't look like any of them are ever going to get out. Perhaps, I don't know, there's such a stigma attached to it.
Sure.
The most recent one who tried to get out, pleading for special circumstances. In fact, she had the administration at the prison she was at put in a plea for her, basically because her medical condition is so bad. It's Susan Atkins, who recently lost a leg and is now battling brain cancer, and they have her in a special medical unit, and she's been transferred to another. I don't have the prison on the tip of my tongue right here, but I don't think Susan Atkins, known as Sexy Sadie, has much time to live either. And one of the people who shot down her plea was our governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and curiously enough, there's a recent photo that's out on the internet you could find if you probably plugged in Susan Atkins and Arnold Schwarzenegger into a Google image search engine. It shows a picture of Atkins and Schwarzenegger together back in, it must have been the early 80s. Schwarzenegger was making some media visits or something to a prison where they had some type of workout program or something going on, and there you see Arnie and Sexy Sadie together.
Wow. That is curious. Because as you know, I've written some stuff myself on the Manson thing in Lucid View, and I just found that any lead at all, any thread or any connection at all became significant. It's just such a strange and murky sort of imaginal stew that the Manson thing kind of was brewed in, like a witch's cauldron.
It just goes on and on. There are so many connections to the occult world and the rock music industry of the 60s and the film industry and the whole drug black market underground that was going on back in those days, as well as the pornography and possible kiddie porn and these things going on, and even some very dark ritual magic that some have contended there was ritual murders involved, and that's when you get into all these connections possibly to the process church of the final judgment and
Scientology.
And Scientology as well. This goes on, and admittedly there's a lot of misinformation and red herrings out there, which makes it that much more of a rabbit hole to crawl into.
Mm-hmm.